Hello and welcome back to a new video. Finally doing the long-awaited Peter Hammill Patreon review. Peter Hammill, for those of you who don't know, is the lead singer to Van der Graaf Generator, who I infamously reviewed about a year and a half ago, which set forth a terrible chain reaction that unfolded during the following year and eventually landed me in this place that I'm at right here. I have a couple confessions to make before I get into the album itself. The first off is that I procrastinated this video like you wouldn't believe. There are a couple reasons for that. The patron was gracious enough to let me review a Peter Hammill album I actually owned. However, that being said, it was a Peter Hammill album that I am not really the biggest fan of it. I don't dislike it, but my take on the album is pretty subdued, and I don't think it's one of... I think probably... I haven't heard much of his discography, but I have strong suspicions the album I have is probably one of his lesser works. So bear that in mind. Don't rage too hard at me, although you probably will anyway. I don't know. So the album I'm going to be talking about today is, of course, Chameleon in the Shadow of the Night, which is Peter Hammill's second solo album. Although there's some weird stuff happening with Peter Hammill solo albums, because this is his second solo album. Technically, it's his third, because the Aerosol Grey Machine, the first Van der Graaf album, was recorded as a Peter Hammill solo album, and then, for some reason that I think had to do with them getting out of their contract with Mercury, the Van der Graaf name was slapped on it and it was thrown out there in 1969. So the album opens up in a pattern that will follow for a lot of these songs, you know. Acoustic guitar strummings. Eventually you get some more instrumentation, but very sparingly and only towards the end of the song. Lyrically, this is about the final tour Van der Graaf Generator did in Europe before they broke up. And, you know, if this song is anything to go by, that tour must have been just absolute misery. But then again, this is Peter Hammill. And I'm pretty sure Peter Hammill could make, like, say, I Get Around by the Beach Boys sound like hell on earth. Still so pure. I would really like to be able to say that I liked this track, or even that I remembered anything from it, but I really don't. When it's over, I don't even remember the melody or how it went, and you know, most of the other songs in this album I can at least remember a little bit of, but not this one. This is fantastic. I really like this. There's a couple of songs on here that are basically poor man's Van der Graaf Generator songs, where, you know, they're either a little too simple to be Van der Graaf, or, as with this one, they're a little too sloppy to be Van der Graaf. But otherwise, they are much closer in terms of tone and instrumentation to Van der Graaf Generator than they are to the rest of the album. And as such, stand head and shoulders over the rest of the album. And this is the first of those tracks. Lyrically, I have no idea what he's talking about. Presumably more depressing stuff. I mean, that's kind of a given. Maybe related to being on tour. Who knows? I certainly don't. This is another song that's pretty good. I don't like it as much as Rock and Roll, and I don't like it as much as What's to Come, but it's pretty good. It's another very lyrically heavy song. You know, he's doing the acoustic guitar strumming thing, and the problem I have with that kind of music is that you have to really feel lyrics and be a lyrics kind of guy, and you got to really soak that in and appreciate it and marinate on it and appreciate the meaning that drips from the words. But that's not really who I am as a music listener. I'm a music guy. I'm not a lyrics guy. I listen to music for the music, and when the music is, for the most part, just some... I get a little bored. I get a little bored. But the song is still really good. I think it's probably about the end of Van der Graaf Generator, you know, calling it quits because it had just become too much. But it honestly, from the sound of it, it could be about a romantic relationship as well. I really don't know. This is much more memorable to me, if only because it is so dark. You know, this is Pawn Hearts dark. You know, this is invoking suicide directly at the end, you know, asking yourself why do we exist? You know, what is the reason for any of it? What is the meaning of it? You know, and not finding any, and being so depressed that you don't find any that you contemplate suicide. Or at least that's the interpretation of the lyrics that I've read. But you might find it to be a life-affirming odyssey of the realization that nothing matters and therefore we are truly and ultimately free. Easy to Slip Away is great, very memorable. One of the major songs from here besides German Overalls, and a song that's to come that I always remember when I've listened to this album. He refers back to his old roommates I think from the 60s again, and I don't really know what the story is with these people. I think like one of them, maybe one or both of them went to America. I know one of them was an actress, but something went on between these people and Peter Hammill because he sang about them quite a bit in the early 70s, and I don't really know what that's all about. But I'm just a silly internet reviewer, so don't put any stock in what I say. Sadly, this is another in one ear, out the other kind of song. I wish I could say something about it. It's nice, it has a good melody, but when I'm not listening to it, I don't remember it at all. And that's something that I find throughout this album. The album closer, The Black Room, is easily the best thing on this album by a long shot, way better even than Rock and Roll. You know, this honestly, with better production and maybe some better instrumentation, this could be a really good Van der Graaf Generator song. Lyrically, like anything else, I have no idea what it's about. My guess, depression, presumably. I don't know though. Musically though, the production aside, I can't believe I didn't mention this. This album was recorded in what I believe was a very primitive home studio, which is why it sounds the way it does. The production isn't great, but it doesn't really matter because the music shines through, and this song is just phenomenal. I especially like this little instrumental break in the middle that it's almost Canterbury prog sounding, which, if you know me, is a good thing because that's really the only kind of prog I listen to that much nowadays. But anyway, wonderful track, phenomenal album closer. I would even go so far as to say this is the only thing you desperately need to listen to from this album. You know, you could leave everything else, but The Black Room is the keeper. You listen to that. If you even think you might like Peter Hammill, listen to it. This is one of those albums that is hard to review. I probably would have never done this review if I hadn't been paid to, because this album falls into that category for me where it's not great enough for me to be really like, yes, this is amazing, but it's also not bad enough for me to really get any material out of it. Where it's somewhere in the middle. It's good, but it's very plain and unadorned to me, and I don't find very much to talk about it, and I really hadn't thought about it in about 6 months before I was asked to review it. And I hadn't listened to it in that long either. A lot of it to me is that this is stripped down acoustic minimalist music. And minimalist music is alright, but when it's just one guy plucking away at an acoustic guitar for 7 to 8 minutes at a time, I get bored. And it doesn't. I don't know what it is. I know Peter Hammill wrote all the songs for Van der Graaf Generator, but maybe something was missing. Maybe they helped him in some way that I'm not aware of, because I'm blown away at how unmemorable a lot of this material is. And people always talk about how difficult and Byzantine and just all over the place and terrifying and dense Van der Graaf Generator are. But for me, Van der Graaf Generator songs, I generally, the second listen, I remember them. And I'm like, oh yes, that's Arrow, or that's the Emperor in his War Room, or what do I know? That's the Undercover Man. This, to me, with the exception of the 2 electric tracks, with the exception of the 2 tracks that are closer to Van der Graaf, and even those I don't remember super well, this album, way too much of it goes in one ear and out the other. And I don't really know why that is. I think a part of it is the sort of stripped down nature of it. But even then, there are stripped down albums that I love. I don't understand it. And it's not even I don't like Peter Hammill thing. I love Fool's Mate, and some of his later solo stuff is really good as well. I love Nadir's Big Chance. But I don't know. I don't really know what to say, and I hate to give this a not a good review because I was paid to do this. But at the same time, way too much of this album bores me too much for me to really recommend it. I would say the best tracks on here you should seek out on your own and listen to independently, like German Overalls, Rock and Roll, especially the Black Tower. Is it the Black Tower or is it the Black Room? Let me see about that. In the Black Room, including the Tower. That shows you how much I've thought about this album. That track especially, that's as good. That could have been a Van der Graaf Generator song. And a lot of the material on here, I feel like there are seeds of things that could have been better Van der Graaf Generator songs. But on the whole, it's okay. It's decent. It's good. I don't know. It's not a bad album, but I don't know if I could recommend it unless you are a really devoted fan of Peter Hammill and Van der Graaf Generator, or unless your tastes are significantly different to mine. If white guys plucking away at acoustic guitars, monotonously for 7 and 8 minutes at a time, not monotonously, but you know what I'm saying, without significant variation. If that's your cup of tea, this is your album. You should listen to it because this is your album. But not for me.